One, welcome everyone to GDG Surrey. This is a virtual meetup, and this is going to be our first project showcase on this platform. I am Preeti. I'm the organizer of this group. We started last year, and it's been quite an amazing journey where we met amazing people like Wax, Sergi, and all of you who are attending. We have been expanding to different, we have our reach to different countries. In the local communities, we collaborate with different communities, different people, and we just try to bring all the knowledge, all the resources that we can get. We just want to bring it to our platform and share with all the members here. And with that, I'll get started with today's project showcase. Today we have this exciting deep dive into graph-based RAG, a groundbreaking approach to enhancing API documentation and automated code generation. Leading this session, we have Wax. Thanks for him to allow me to use his nickname, but you can see him on this screen with Joaquin. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. Wax, you can correct me, please. Thank you. He's a full
That's
stack.
pretty much it.
Perfect, thank you. He's a full stack software engineer specializing in infrastructure and AI, with contributions to major open source projects like LangChain, Void Editor, Arise AI, and Next. As he has his expertise in different technological stack and tools. As the founder of his own company, he designs and develops robust enterprise systems for financial institutions across the Asia Pacific region. Over to you, Wax, and welcome to the community.
Thank you for that introduction, Preeti. Hello, it's nice to meet everyone in the community. I will start by sharing. I was actually going to give a little bit of an introduction for myself, but thank you, Preeti. I'll just skip that slide.
No, we would love to hear about you from you.
Oh,
You know,
sure.
there's
Okay.
always always exciting stuff that we would love to know.
Okay. So I'm going to give a little bit of insight into what the talk is about, but starting with me. First off, who am I? So my name is Joaquin, as Preeti mentioned. I'm an open source developer. I also have a company where pretty much just like a very short history. I taught myself how to code around 8 years ago, around year 3 or 4. I developed a SaaS tool for finance companies to help them with processing loans. And that's where I make most of my money. My passion lies in open source contributions, and I'm very passionate about tooling and context injection specifically for LLMs and how that works, what that's going to look like in the future, and what that also looks like today in the interim while LLMs are kind of developing and getting better. My contributions have primarily been to Nuxt, LangChain, and Void Editor. I've been hitting Void Editor more recently, and for those of you that may not know about it, Void Editor is a open source alternative to Cursor. It's completely free and works like really, really well. I'm proud of the community. You should check it out if you have some time. Just like type Void Editor in, and you'll get a pretty accurate result. So I wanted to start off by saying like, what is GraphRAG? But I kind of wanted to throw the question to someone in the community if that would be possible. Does anybody want to take a shot at trying to define what GraphRAG is?
Anybody about GraphRAG? You can unmute yourself. I just need everybody to present it.
Oh, Zed. I haven't heard of Zed. I'm going to check that out. I'll check out Zed. You check out Void Editor. Okay. So just to do a quick description of GraphRAG, well, reading off of this, GraphRAG is a method that combines retrieval augmented generation with knowledge graphs, allowing language models to generate more accurate responses through structured interconnected data retrieval. Or a more simple way that I define it is it's similar to traditional RAG, only instead of just breaking down the data or knowledge into chunks, you also connect the relationships of those chunks. Whether those relationships are semantic or more literal or have direction or not direction, the point is those chunks are interconnected, making more sense of knowledge, because knowledge tends to be more related and have relationships rather than having like each block of knowledge in isolation. So the idea or theory was that a graph is a better representation of knowledge than just traditionally turning it into chunks and then getting vector embeddings from those chunks and then searching those vector embeddings. So does anyone have any questions regarding that?
Sorry to interrupt, but we can't see your screen. It's just a black screen.
I'm sorry. Okay, is it back?
Then it shares this same screen as our
Okay, how
platform,
about
but
now? Is it back?
I know it's just a black screen.
Okay, let me just like close the share and then try again. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. How about now?
When you switch to the presentation, it goes black. Do you want to share it
Is
with
it
an
is
email?
it
I
still
can.
black?
Yeah, it is. Sorry about that.
No worries. Let me try if it's a different website. Is it black?
It is. Somebody suggested you may need to share another application for presenting.
Okay. Let me stop sharing and see if I can share direct the page instead of the whole
Okay.
screen. That might work better. Okay. Does this work?
Yes.
That's working fine.
Yep. You can see it.
Okay, all right. So just simply, that is what GraphRAG is. Does anyone have any questions as to like GraphRAG or how it's implemented or my thoughts on it? Okay, we can move on. So my stack with regards to how I built this project was, it's a pretty basic stack. I just wanted to quickly do a proof of concept. Some of the things I used for this stack, including the language and the model, might seem a little bit dated because I did build this project last year. I will give some insight into how I think it can be improved this year, given the current state of models and tooling, and also moving forward where I think it kind of like fits in with the development of LLMs and context tooling and MCP. So that will come a little bit later. But yeah, so I used Vercel for web hosting, a Google Cloud Run function like for Python, just to run the backend. I used Neo4j to host the graph database. And I used Claude 3.5 Sonnet as the model. At the time, it was the state of the art. I believe the best now is Claude 3.7, in my opinion. Yeah, so does anyone have any questions before I move on to the actual core of my
Yep.
presentation?
There's one question.
Okay.
Conrad asked, does it create the watch knowledge base using a graph database, something like Neo4j?
Does what? Sorry. Let me just
Does it create the watch knowledge base using a graph database, something like Neo4j? It's in
what
the
is the
comments.
watch knowledge base? What is that? What does that mean?
Conrad, would you like to continue with it? Would you like to help us with the concept?
I can show my code later for how I actually like created the graph on Neo4j. It was very literal. I typed out like a big chunk of the graph myself.
Oh, so it's a typo.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah. No worries. Conrad, you can always unmute yourself if that's easier, and everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. It is possible to use DeepSeek R1 for this stack. Actually, the idea behind this, and I'll explain later how it can be integrated with tooling, is that you can replace the model with whatever model you want. In fact, I think this type of thing would work very well for like local models, specifically Quen 3.5 coder, 32 billion parameter. If you have a strong enough computer, if your computer is weaker, you could always quantize it. But models are just getting really good now. Okay, so I'm just gonna jump into the actual, wait, one sec, project itself. So before the demo, I wanted to kind of like give a little bit of a briefer. So what I wanted to talk to you about today was how GraphRAG can be used to improve code generation specifically. Um, Before I get into it, I wanted to kind of like explain how GraphRAG basically fits into code gen, because I mentioned before that the whole purpose of graphs for RAG was it's a better representation of knowledge. Now, um, it's also a better representation. At least I strongly believe it's a much better representation of what an API documentation or an open API spec looks like. And that was why I built this project in the first place. So the goal of this demo was I wanted to be able to teach Claude how to write an API that it was not familiar with. I'm going to show side by side how my system uses Claude to write code using that API, and also how Claude tries to do it, and then how it's not familiar with it. So without further ado, I will jump into the demo. Preeti, let me know if you
Yep.
can't see my screen.
I will.
Okay. All right. Visible?
Yes, it is.
Uh, Perfect. Okay. So this is my website. Anybody could like jump into it and play around with it. It's exposed. It doesn't require any sign up. It doesn't require any keys. This is just like a demo that I wanted to play around with. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be asking Claude 3.5 Sonnet to be able to generate code specifically to scrape data from my friend's website, Roddy Cooks. So he has a website where he just lists up a bunch of recipes, and I want to see if I can like have Claude generate code that would scrape a mobile image of every page in that website using an API. So let me just copy that. Okay. By the way that I built it was a three-step process. So the first step is to assess the question to see if it's related to the APIs that it has knowledge of. The second step is to search and traverse the graph and summarize data from it. And the last step is to actually generate the code off of the researched data that it acquires. So it's kind of like a agentic search flow. I implemented this just like straight up in Python. I'm also open sourcing my code, so afterwards I can just share you links to the GitHub repo, so you can see the back end and front end of this project as well, in case you want to just get parts of it. All right, so while that's happening, I'm going to ask the same question to Claude API. Okay, and then here back to mine. Okay, so it came out with an output. So what it output was essentially the code that I requested it to generate and the documentation that it references in order to be able to write that code. Now I had it structure the code in Markdown in a way that's easy to understand. And if you look at it, it kind of looks like API documentation. So that was kind of cool. What we're going to do now is we're going to copy this code and we're going to try running it on my computer. Okay, so it's hoisted. Let's get the URL for the website of my friend. And I'll get the API key. Don't worry, I am going to change this API key as soon as I am done with this presentation. Okay. And then if this works, it's going to output a folder that has the results. So it's running. Okay, it seems to be working. Okay, so it got 5 out of 11 pages so far. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so we were able to successfully scrape all of the recipes in mobile format from my friend's website, which is kind of cool, using the Firecrawl API. I forgot to explain, by the way, the Firecrawl API is basically just an easy web crawler. So for those of you that don't know Firecrawl, it's just an API. It's a service that allows you to use LLMs and also crawling methods to extract data directly from websites. And it does a really good job of like doing rotating proxies and like the annoying stuff that you need to do to be able to access like most websites. So that's what it's really good for. Okay, so that worked out. Let's look at what Claude gave. Hello?
Hi.
Kyle.
Hi, Kyle.
Hi.
Hi, Kyle.
Sorry, does someone have a question?
Hi, Kyle. Did you have something to mention? Something to ask? I'm not sure, but there is one. I'm sorry. Okay, no worries.
No worries.
There's a question in
It
the
was
chat.
a
Oh,
misclick. It was a
sorry.
misclick.
Yeah,
No
it was a
worries.
misclick. Yeah, there's a
Okay.
question. Can you boost the font? Is
Okay,
it
boost the
for
font where? With the terminal, with the code itself?
VS Code terminal? Yeah.
Okay. Wait, let me see first how I can boost the font, and then I'll try to share that. Okay. So in VS Code, do you have suggestions on how to boost the font? I haven't actually done that.
Yeah, I was thinking. Anyone has suggestions? How do you boost the font there? Probably Google it.
Oh, there, Command plus key on Mac OS. Awesome, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
So, oh, there. Wow, okay, that was really effective. Thank you. I'm sharing full screen again. And then here, is that big enough? Do you want me to make it bigger? Here we go. Sorry.
Probably, yeah, slightly bigger.
Okay. Yeah. So let me just do Command plus.
Is that good, Conrad? Yeah, perfect. Let's
Okay.
continue.
So we were able to get a successful crawl writing Fire code. Now note that when you cross-reference this code with the same code that was recommended directly from Claude, which is here, the two things that I noticed right away is that inside of Claude, it does not use the mobile scraping feature that's available from Firecrawl because that was only made available about a month and a half ago. So it tries to construct its own mobile screenshot in order to do it. I tried running the Claude code a while ago, and I did get like an error with regards to the parameters that it like submitted. I also noticed that it made a mistake with the output response, not properly handling the response object from the API. So I wanted to show you guys what I used to train, what I used to actually teach Claude how to write the API code from Firecrawl. So this is the graph that I created. This graph is a visual graph-based representation of the API documentation of Firecrawl. All of the pink nodes are API endpoints. Notice that they're the most heavily connected nodes. All of the green nodes here are the parameters that you can plug in. And then the yellow are the errors, and the lighter green are the response values that you can get. Or actually, no, sorry, the response values are the purple ones. I can't actually see when you type in the message when I'm sharing my screen. So does anyone have a question while I'm here?
No, not right now, but I will say the question for you.
Sure.
And others can also unmute themselves whenever they want.
Okay, perfect. So I generated this graph directly from the API documentation, the Open API spec of Firecrawl, in order to be able to create this, basically like how it's connected. So it starts from the entry point, it goes into the API points, and notice that each concept has an edge that connects the two of them. It does have a one-way direction generally. And I also made it more explicit with has argument, has error, has endpoint. And that's pretty much how I traverse the graph. So I start by just giving it a summary of all of the API endpoints and nodes. And then it chooses from there which ones it wants to go deeper into. And then from that, it'll kind of like pull information from all of them and then kind of select which ones it wants and then cut and then create a summary, cut, create a summary, cut, create a summary. And based on that, it was able to write up this documentation that's specifically necessary only for the request that I wanted to create. And then after it created this documentation, it then wrote code based on this documentation, which is what you'll then see here. So, well, that's pretty much it. So that is how I used GraphRAG to improve code generation for Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Now, before I go into the core benefits that I believe exist from this and also the core implications that come out of it, I want to know if anybody has any questions regarding this.
Yes, Arjun.
So I have a question. When it dynamically change the code, for example, you want to change some, I don't know, data structure, add some variable, and so how it deals with the dynamically changes the diffs with the code. So this, does it provide some diffs, or it will be like new generated response.
Are you referring to if you want to edit something inside of the graph, or are you referring to if you want to add something
inside the code? I want to change the code like a source code, and make some changes. And what should I do to put all the text again in the LLM, and then all the pipeline should be processed as well, or it can deal with only diffs that only these lines that are particularly made the changes.
Oh, you mean in my project? Okay, so my project doesn't have
in your
any.
project.
Okay, so in my project, it's more of a demo. It's a one-step thing. It doesn't have memory of like previous output as well as like your question in order to adapt it. So you just need to like rephrase what you would need to do, at least if you're playing around with my demo, would be. So if you go to hunyo.dev and you're playing around with the demo, you would have to click on new prompt here, and then generate like basically more code. Rewrite the prompt and then like have it generated again. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, it's clear. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. So I didn't build in memory into this. It did take a while because I didn't optimize like the way that it did graph traversal. There's a lot of things that I could do to improve the experience, but it was really meant for demo purposes and not really for production purposes. So I kind of built the minimum kind of viable product related to it. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Because I also built some tools like that can enhance the code, not only code, the business requirements as well, data structures. So I deal with such with issues that with somebody change the code outside, and I need to dynamically follow the changes. And yeah, I also use the memory. As you mentioned, you understand the issue. Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also like with memory, especially if you have it like in a business setting, then you also have kind of like to handle like prompt injection issues. You have to handle kind of like editing, especially if it's like something that isn't just like derived from an API, but like can be accessed. Then there's additional issues related to it. But really, I'm just exploring at this stage the application of using GraphRAG for code gen. So if anybody else if there's no one else that has questions with regards to it, I can go to like the conclusions that I have related to the concept.
Yes, let's continue. I'll keep an eye for the hands and the comments.
Okay, so I built the graph for this concept myself. And it did take me some time because I did hard code it, but there are certain implications that I wanted to discuss that I believe make turning API documentation into graphs actually like a lot more viable. So the very first one is, what are the core benefits related to turning I'm sorry, I didn't have time to build a slide for this. What are the core benefits related to turning a graph, an API documentation into a graph for an LLM? I believe that the core benefits, at least in my experience, was when I turned the API into a graph, it did three things right off the bat. Number one, it got a 90% success rate in the first go for more complex commands. Versus when you would post it up to Claude and it's not so familiar with the API and it would like make some errors related to it, and you need to adjust the code yourself. The second is that it no longer hallucinated on what the parameters were for the, here, actually, I could share this to show what I'm referring to. So when it started initiating the crawl, it no longer hallucinated on these, which are the core parameters necessary in order to get FireCrawl to be able to take a screenshot that's mobile. So all of the parameters that it would send into the API endpoint, it got the endpoint correct, it got the parameters correct, it got the response value correct. So even the way that it like would parse the response value here, it also got it correct. It also handled failure and error statuses significantly better. And the last benefit that I saw from it was by turning it into a graph, because as I showed you, a graph has relationships between concepts. It handled long-range dependencies significantly better. So an example of a long-range dependency would be here. Sorry for jumping back and forth between like sharing the screen and so an example of a long-range dependency is this. In order to use the cancel crawl endpoint, it depends on the response value from the crawl endpoint, because you can't cancel the crawl unless you get the ID that's returned from the crawl response, specifically this ID. So the crawl response like returns an ID value, and you need to use that ID in the cancel crawl in order to be able to cancel the crawl, which is why it's crawl, and then there you have dynamically the ID of the cancel crawl. So those kinds of long-range dependencies usually don't work very well in traditional traditional RAG structures, where each concept is broken into individual blocks, because it would miss what it is dependent on. So by making it into a graph, you can account for those long-range dependencies, create that relationship, and explicitly state that cancel crawl depends on crawl response. So your LLM is very much aware that if it's using the cancel crawl function, it also needs to look for where this is, and it can see that this is the response of this. Stop sharing. Which makes it all very much more observable. It makes it a lot easier to understand exactly what's being fed to your LLM. It also makes it a lot easier for the LLM to understand what's going on with regards to the API. And if you have any changes that you want to make, it's easier to fix those changes and then redo the run, have the LLM try again. So those are the core benefits that I noticed in relation to GraphRAG. So we can skip towards the implications that I believe are the most exciting aspect of this. While GraphRAG is cool, and turning an API documentation into a GraphRAG is also really cool, what I find especially cool about this is APIs today are being standardized using the Open API specification. And those specifications are increasingly becoming better and better at representing these long-range dependencies and all of the requirements necessary in order for you to be able to write code using the API well. So because Open API spec is structured, the implication of being able to build or generate a GraphRAG from an Open API spec is that you can actually theoretically take an Open API spec and automatically generate a GraphRAG for that spec without using any LLMs whatsoever. You just need to have a good parser, something that looks at Open API and can automatically generate a graph. And with that implication, that means that any company that has an API that uses Open API spec, you can just go in, get their API, and turn it into a graph. And all of a sudden, you have an LLM that can write code in that graph. So that's one of the things I'm most excited about. Is that like if you don't need to use LLMs to build it, if you don't need tedious processes in terms of actually implementing a graph, and you can just auto-generate it directly from an API spec, all of a sudden it makes this entire thing a lot more tractable. Now you can have multiple APIs that all have their own graphs, and they can all basically feed into an LLM from multiple sources to tell it or teach it how to write code better.
Can you tell us how would you express the long distance relationship with OpenAPI?
Yeah, so I believe that in the latest two versions or the latest version of the Open API spec, They just patched in the ability to identify long-range relationships or relationships like dependencies, or dependencies where you have a parameter for one function or one API that's dependent on the output of another. So like, there's very smart people that are currently working on how to implement or standardize this open API spec. By the way, open API is YAML, I believe. Like that's the data, that's how it's written. So it's written in a YAML format. So it's very parsable. If you are interested in looking into the Open API spec, you can just type here Open API. So you have the Open API initiative. The specifications that I was looking at was 3.1.1, I believe. So if I share my screen, I can. Here. So you can see kind of like the Open API specifications and how they actually identify kind of like objects inside of the Open API. It's quite extensive, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but basically the idea is just it's trying to capture every concept inside of a REST API. I believe it also does allow for GraphQL type API endpoints. However, for GraphQL type API endpoints, it defines each endpoint like within GraphQL as like a REST API as well. So it's like you're like talking to one endpoint rather than the complex weaving that GraphQL is. Oh, here. Can you show how you define similarity in your graph database code? Are you using LangChain instead of SQL graph embedded command? To be honest, here, I can show you how I wrote the code. Because this is actually the project that I used. So I kind of wrote my own service system. So I created models first and Neo4j service. So just to be able to kind of like do query and traversal. And then I basically did I did a raw Python graph traversal that's multi-step. So I guess it's better rather than showing it to you if I explain it. What I did was I did it where it first feeds in all of the endpoints inside of the Open API with a summary of each endpoint. And then I allowed the LLM to choose the endpoints that it found most relevant. Once it chose the endpoints that it found most relevant to the query that I gave it, it then went back to the graph and it got all of the relationships of each endpoint and then summarized only the important notes from each relationship and each relationship node. And then it repeated doing that. So it would capture all of the relationships at each stage. It's kind of an extensive method. I would probably do a more curated method. Also, if you're interested in doing like more sophisticated graph traversal methodologies, so there's a lot of content that's written about this from Microsoft. I think they're kind of like the leaders in terms of like graph traversal and relevance detection, and they even have like lightweight models that assess if something's relevant for the graph or not relevant, and then just return like true or false, like a Boolean. Well, I also wanted to like say something to the community, if possible. If there's anyone here who's looking at kind of like doing an open source project, one of the interesting use cases that I thought could be done with this was for the most recent Open API spec. I didn't have the time to do it myself, but I think a parser that automatically turns Open API spec into a graph is a really cool concept, and I might like try starting that in the next few months. If I do, I'll share it with Preeti and also like anybody else who's here, just so that like, because I really feel like this could be beneficial for code generation, specifically for API packages, especially because APIs change so much, and people keep dishing out features that update it, that like I think keeping an updated reference that's in the form of a graph would be a really cool thing. Yeah. All right. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Vex, for such a amazing project showcase.
No problem.
Thank you. And if anybody else has their project that they want to showcase, I'm quickly going to share the link for a form. They can fill out that form, and we will just screen that, get back to you, and you can be the next presenter on our platform. Let's build together. Let's learn together. That's the whole point of it. Here's the form link.
Oh, by the way,
Yes, please.
before we end, would it be okay if like well, some of you guys like show you on video, so we could do like a screenshot image?
Yes, I love these selfies. Watch yourself. Let me also paste the LinkedIn handle for you. Okay. Let me quickly do this screenshot screen. Alrighty.
Got it.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So thank you so much, and let's keep in touch. Let's start building something together or sharing something, with each other, so that we all learn together and grow together. Okay.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.